guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video. It is a long one. Pop your popcorn, settle in, have a beverage. So we're going to be using Snow Buddies here from My Favorite Things. I am also going to be using the inside out stitched rectangles, but you can use whatever you have, just whatever dies you have. So I'm going to be stamping out some of my images to die cut, and then I'm going to be stamping some of them to mask. Before we get too far along in the scene building process, I did want to mention, because it is a limited time, My Favorite Things is having their usual Wednesday Blitz Day sale, and then they're also having a 10% off site-wide, including the new release, which is fantastic. I will be shopping that once I get this video uploaded. And that goes through November 11th. So I will link that below. So much happening in this video. So I knew that I wanted to do a video that was going to be, showing kind of the basics of scene building and some tips and tricks. So we're going to build two different scenes today, two different ways. So I stamped those images so that I could cut them out with my dies. Then this is actually masking paper that has a backer on it. I didn't end up loving this. Normally I use Eclipse masking paper, and I'm going to be honest, that's what I'm going to go back to. But so this is a masking paper I wanted to try. This is for the masking of a one-layer scene. If you're not into one-layer scenes, if you don't have the dexterity for fussy cutting, don't worry about it. Do the second card with the dies. So here, just to show you, if you are going to fussy cut your masks, you want to hold them in your hand. That is the non-dominant hand, your scissors in your dominant hand, and then keep your scissors straight, and then use your left hand, in my case, or non-dominant hand, to turn the paper. This is going to give you the smoothest cut. And that is how I fussy cut all of my dies. I cut out, you can see the dog in the background, but I didn't end up using it. I ended up using the dogs to do the die scene. So here I'm going to need the masks for the two little girls and the snowman. So my first tip in beginner die cutting or beginner scene building is to make your palette a little bit smaller. Here I just wanted to show you, if you have a mask that you need, like this fence where you need the middle cut out, you can go in with just like a craft knife. This one happens to be by Ranger. I think it's the Tonic craft knife or Tim Holtz craft knife. But you can go in and cut that out and remove it so that it's not a part of your mask. But now here we are back to tip number one. Minimize the area you have to cover. That is my first tip. If you are just getting into card making or scene making on your cards, you don't have to do the whole thing. You don't have to do the whole A2 size. So I've cut two panels here with the stitched rectangles, and this is what I'm going to use to build my scenes on. So the second tip is, if you're beginning in scene building, don't overlay your stamps. So don't stamp a stamp on top of a stamp. I'll say that 3 times fast. You can create a beautiful scene with having your stamps all together, like just stamped down without having to build upon it for dimension. So here I am going to stamp my two girls first. This is the third tip in scene building. Make sure you're paying attention to the horizons where you're stamping your stamps. So my two little girls are level with each other. So I stamped them down, and I did stamp them in alcohol safe ink. But for my snowman, you can see he's a little bit further up, which means he's further back in my scene. And so that's going to create a little bit of dimension already, because we're changing the perspective. So stamping the stamp a little bit higher up puts them further back into the scene, which is going to pull the girls forward, and already we're starting to create that perspective for our scene. Here, you can use dies. There are dies for hills, stencils for hills, but I'm going to freehand it. And so I'm going to show you two different ways, well, 3 actually. So you can do just a hill, you can do kind of a swooshy hill, and then you can just do a flat line for her horizon. Any of these will work for your scene building. This is masking paper. I am going to go with the one in the middle with the kind of swoopy hill. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Like it truly does not. So I'm just going to go in with just kind of this rounded hill that kind of swoops up. And then I am going to trim this down. You will need your top and your bottom piece of masking paper for doing this. Something to note, I built scenes for years without masking paper at all. I made my own. So if you are in a situation where your crafty budget is limited, you can make your own masks with copy paper and Tombow Mono multi-glue. Because Tombow Mono multi-glue dries repositionable after it dries, like you can move it around. I used to make all of my scenes with that. You can also use Post-it notes. The sticky part of a Post-it note. It's going to be a little bit more challenging to use a Post-it note, but if we can only afford what we can afford. So here I am going to put my masks in place. Like I said, I was trying out a different masking paper that had a backer, so I needed to peel mine off. But normally I use the Eclipse masking paper, and that does not have a backer. So you just want to line these up right over your stamped images. This is that stitch die cut panel that we cut out and then stamped on top of. And then I'm just going to put my masks on for both my girls and my snowman. Once those masks are on, then I am going to put my swoopy snow mask on top of that. And you can do this, lined up on the left-hand side or the right. I just did it where there would be a little dip in the middle. And then we're going to go in and do some ink blending. You don't have to do ink blending for your background. You could do Copic coloring, colored pencil, whatever your medium is. But I find that this saves me a ton on ink, and I'm very happy with my blend that I get when I use Distress inks. So here I started with the Salvaged Patina, and I thought that I was going to go with more of a blue, like Salvaged Patina, Salty Ocean, and then Mermaid Lagoon. That's not what I ended up doing. So I put down the Salvaged Patina, and then I thought that maybe I would like a little bit of yellow, almost that if the scene was at like sunrise or sunset. And so I brought in some scattered straw and then just brought that up from the bottom. Because we're doing snow hills instead of like grass hills, you do want to make sure that you're getting right up against the edge of that mask, because that's the absence of the color, like the white that's left behind is going to be what is this top of our hill. So if you don't have anything behind it, it's not going to be a clean hill. So once I put the yellow down, I blended it back out with the Salvaged Patina, and then I added some Salty Ocean just around the edges. And I did even go back, you'll see when we do the second card, that I did end up adding just a little bit of Mermaid Lagoon around the edges to really just kind of add some darkness. Once this part is done, before you remove the first mask, we're going to put on the second one. This just makes it easier to line up so that our horizon is exactly where it needs to be. So once that is down, then I'll be able to remove the masking paper from the bottom. And you can see that it did kind of take off the first layer of my people masks, but there was enough left that it would block the color, and so I just rolled with it. You can do your snow whatever color you like. I wouldn't recommend yellow, but other than that, you can do it whatever color you like. You could do some pinks, some blues, some blue greens. I like the blue violet, and so I use shaded lilac for my snow. I just kind of did it around the edges, and then you can see me bringing it down underneath the snowman to create a little bit of shadow underneath him. And then once that's done, our ink blending is complete. You can remove the mask and then go in and remove the masks for your characters. Now, because of the paper that the masking paper I chose to use, I won't be able to salvage these masks. But if you use the Eclipse, you should be able to peel them off and just stick them in with your stamp set and use them again in the future. So now that that one's done, we're going to do the second one. This is a little bit more sped up, but it's the same process. There's just no masking involved because we're going to be using die cuts for our characters. But the premise is still the same. We're going to put the ground down to mask that. We're going to do the color of the sky. I used the same exact color combination, but this time I knew I was going to use the yellow, so I just started with that. On the bottom, again, creating that really nice horizon line for my snow hill, and then to the salvage patina, the salty ocean, and I think here I did show the mermaid lagoon. So just putting that down. You could always go in and build this up some more, you know, with like snow spatters as if it was snowing outside, you know, with white acrylic paint or gouache. Like there's a million different ways that you could add to this scene. But I tried to keep it relatively simple for beginners on purpose. So now, since we don't have anything stamped here, I am really just adding the shading to the left and the right. I did want to show you that you can use your masks again to create a multi-layer look. So here with this one, it's the same mask. You saw me just remove it and flip it over. I'm just going to add some shading right to the top because this is going to create a shadow behind my hill so that my front hill will still have a very clean white outline. And it just helps make it look more multi-dimensional. So these are the two scenes that we have going on here, and then we're going to get into the Copic coloring. The Copic coloring is sped up. I know how long this video is. It is a very long video, even for me. But when I started, I had 2 hours and 50 minutes, 50 minutes of footage, and that I needed to cram down into one video. I thought about splitting it up into two, but it really just didn't make sense. So here we are with just kind of an extra long one, but hopefully a super helpful one if you're into building scenes for your cards. So I did have to speed this up a little bit, but this isn't really the point of the video. You know what I'm saying? Like the Copic coloring is something that I enjoy and I like to include. And if you're looking for, you know, some pointers on how to color things, I'm happy to help with that. But the premise of the video is to talk about the scene building. So you saw me do a pretty typical Caucasian skin tone for the first girl. For the second girl, I went more of a Black or African American young lady. You guys know how I feel about including different skin tones in my videos. I think that it's important. And then I added a blush cheek for both of them and blended it out with my lightest color. For most of the skin tones, like they just have a shadow all around their face because they have so much winter gear on. They pretty much just have a shadow underneath their hat, above their scarf, all kinds of shadows. So for the hair of this young lady, it is in braids. And so I really just added shading where it's coming out from behind her hat and then kind of to the top of her braid, which would be the back. And then for this young lady here, I added just some darker grays. I knew that later on I was going to go in and make her hair curly. So I wasn't really stressing too much about adding too much shading here. Just enough so that it made sense with the shading I'm going to add on top of it. For picking my colors, I wanted to show you how I did that. So I already have the yellow and the teal. So I could go with analogous colors and go yellow, yellow, green, green, blue, green, and blue. But I really liked this red violet color, and so I chose to go with a split complement. So I went with the yellow and the blue green, and then across from that, like the 4 quarters, or I'm sorry, 3 like triangles would be that red violet. And so that's how I chose them. I pulled out all of my Copic markers for that, and then I got to work coloring. In order to make my scene make sense, because I chose a blue violet for my snow, and my snowman is made of Snow, he needs to be the same color. And so I'm adding his shading with a BV0, BV000 and a BV02, and then blending that out with a C1. And then here, I'm going to be honest with you, I started to do the shadows just a little underneath. And then because I was kind of like in the groove and wasn't really thinking about what I was doing, I started putting in more of a intermediate shadow versus beginner shadow. Not that you can't do this as a beginner. I think that you probably can, but I wouldn't call it a beginner type shadow. So I will show the shadow for the dogs a little bit later, how I kind of ground them, but I think that this is super cute. And so you can see that before I started putting down just a little bit of a different shadow instead of like they were being backlit. And I'm going to have to go back in and clean that up with my 0 marker. Thankfully, these aren't super dark colors, so it wasn't hard to do. Just kind of cleaned that up so the shadow made sense. But if this is something that you're kind of struggling with a little bit, no worries. I understand that it's more of an intermediate type of technique. And if you want to learn more about that, we can certainly revisit that in another video. For their little puffs, their little snow puffs, I am doing a more of really like a stippling technique. I'm adding a little bit of shadow to just kind of like down into the left because that's how I prefer to add my shadows. But then once I get out to my darkest color, which is a C5, I'm just doing some dots. And then when I go back in and blend it out, I will do the dots of C3 and C1 as well. I have a little trick to make these look fuzzy that you'll see later on in the card. But for now, that's all the shading we're going to do. And then we're going to start bringing in those colors from that split complement. So for my yellows, I am going in and I like to start with my lightest color out to my darkest, darkest back into my lightest. I know that in order, the way that this hat's drawn, in order for the middle portion at the top to look puffed up, it's going to have to be a little concave at the bottom. And so that is why I'm adding that little triangle of shadow underneath. I have to give it some shadow under there so the highlight at the top will make sense. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well. I hope so. But then just blending that out. And I'm just going to go through, and these 3 colors are going to repeat, which is another tip for scene building. If you are building a scene and you are kind of struggling with everything being kind of wild and it's like a little bit too much, just stick to the same colors. Like, stick with them, because those colors that you're using, if you're repeating them, is going to give your card continuity. It's going to give your scene a more seamless look without making it look too busy and kind of all over. So just pick a color palette and stick with it. At the end, you're going to see that I kind of ran into a little bit of a, oh, maybe I should have colored something differently because now what do? I've used this color already. But I didn't add in a 4th color. I stuck with what I had, and I don't think that the card hurts at all because of it. So here I'm adding in the little stripes on his scarf and on his hat. And for this, I just did center shading, meaning I left the center the lightest, and I added shading from the left and the right hand side. And this is just going to give it just a little bit of dimension. Is 4 colors needed for these little bitty lines? Nope, it's not. But that's how I color. You could certainly get away with a 3-color blend in those areas. If you want it to look dimensional, I wouldn't go less than 3. So for this young lady over here, I was looking at the scene and I knew that I had done the other girl's tights, sweater, and hat yellow. So for this girl, I wanted to switch up those things. So I did her shoes, her like scarf, and her gloves yellow. And that way all the colors are still represented, but it's not like so matchy that it doesn't look right. You know what I'm saying? So we're just going to go through and do the coloring. I'll make my antidotes as I usually do. But yeah, we're there. I mean, you can only talk so much about Copa coloring. I try to share my tidbits, but that's how I think I started story time to begin with, quite honestly, because I think that I didn't have, like, I just ran out of stuff to say about Copa coloring, since that's what the majority of what I do. So I will note that we did take Miss Caitlin for her 1-year checkup. She has had a little bit of a cold lately, and we discovered that in addition to just that regular cold, she has a little bit of an ear infection. And so she did get some antibiotics, and I have to actually go pick those up. So to help get rid of her ear infection. So I hope that it helps her feel a little bit better. She's been a little snotty coughy for probably like the last week, but she hasn't been pulling at her ears or anything. So I was kind of surprised to learn she had an ear infection. And then they also told us they checked their iron at their 1-year checkup as well. And her iron is a little bit low, so we have to get further blood work on that. They did say it could be due to her cold, so here's hoping. Like, please, Jesus, don't let this child have another something. I can't even. So, to the Copa coloring for this. For her hat, I'm bringing up the shading from the bottom towards the top. The lightest portion will be just the brim at the top. And then for her skirt, I added shading just where the lines were. It's clearly a pleated skirt, so I just added shading at each one of those lines to give it lots of dimension and fullness. And then I'm going to use the same color combination for the rest of the snowman scarf in the same way I colored the first one. For her little puffy coat, I wanted to make sure it looked nice and full. And so I added the shading around kind of each section so that the highlights in the middle where it would kind of be puffing out. But then obviously where the jacket meets will also have some shading as well, because we know from previous videos, any point where two things meet will have shading, and anything where one object lays on top of another will have shading. And so that is how I am shading her little jacket here. So yeah, so she is sick. She did get her shots for her 1 year, like the chicken pox and stuff like that. So hopefully she doesn't have too bad, Peanut never really had too much of an issue with getting his vaccines, but every child is different. She certainly has been different with her health struggles. I think probably because she goes to daycare, and so she's kind of sick pretty much all the time. Here's hoping she has a bulletproof immune system as an adult. God, I hope so. But so I did give her a little bit of Tylenol after she got her shots, and I'm hoping that will help her feel just a little bit more comfortable, and hopefully she doesn't like spike a fever or anything, but anything's possible. She is gonna be on those antibiotics for that ear infection, so maybe that'll also help her feel a little bit better, though I know some antibiotics have give you some tummy troubles, so hopefully she doesn't get that. There's a lot of hoping going on over here, in case you haven't noticed. So we do have to take her in, since she got her first flu shot. They actually do it in 2 parts for little ones, so we have to take her back in a month to do the second part of her flu shot, and then we have to, like I said, take her in for further blood work for her low iron. So yeah, not looking forward to that. I don't know how they do a blood draw on a 1-year-old, and I am super sad that I have to find out, quite frankly. I don't think it's going to be a good time for me or her. She did pretty good today with her shots, seemed to get over it pretty quickly. But I mean, as a parent, it's terrible to have to watch them. You'd take it for them if you could. I certainly would. But I cannot, and so I can just, give her love and snuggles and rub her back and all that as best I can after it's over. So we're back to the card again. I know we're all over the place. So back to this, I'm just doing basically the shading the same way I did the first girl's hat, outside of the fact that he has like these little ridges, almost like if it has like an elastic band at the base of the hat. And so I accentuated those lines. And here is where I've run into the problem of, I've done this before. So his hat is teal, her hat is yellow, and so it would make sense for her hat to be pink, but I did her jacket pink, and that seems like a lot of pink. So, but I just committed to it. I was like, well, then she's just got a mostly pink outfit. The other girl is a mostly yellow outfit. Like, it's gonna be fine. Because I didn't want to bring in another color and just kind of muddy everything up. So I colored her hat the same way I did the first girl's, you know, putting that little divot so that the portion in the center top would look more raised and just more fabric-like. For the, you might have noticed that for the RVs, the red violets, I am using four colors a little bit darker, but that's just because of the pinks that I chose. I wanted it to be this kind of rosy, you know, kind of pink, a true red violet versus like a magenta. So once I was happy with the way that that was blended out, that's pretty much all of the coloring for this one. I did color in the snowman's arms brown. I didn't show you that. But now I need to fill in this area in between their hats. I'll show you later that I use my hex chart for that. At this point, because I Copic color so much, I'm pretty good at eyeballing it, but you could certainly use your chart to find the color that you need to fill in the background. That is another tip for scene building, is you don't want these big white areas. You need to fill all those things in. I used a Copic Safe pen to give her some curls coming out of her little snow cap. And then this is the trick for making the puff balls look fuzzy. It's a white gel pen. Go do little dots, go right over the black line. That's going to help it look fuzzier. In order to make this little snowman, I assume it's a him. I don't know why, because I made it a him. Fuzzy, I'm also going to do the white dots, but then once they're dry, I'm going to go back in with a Copic color that's one of the ones that I used, and I'm going to go right over top of it. So it still looks fuzzy, it's just white, not the bright white fuzzy, it's the pink fuzzy. I've just colored the white gel pen. So now this is on to the second card's coloring. These are the ones we're going to die cut out. And so I'm coloring the snow with the same blue violets that I used before. All of these color combinations are the same color combinations that you saw in the first card. I'm not going to be using any of the characters that I used from the first card. This one I'm just going to use the doggies because they're adorable. This little sledding doggy. And I have done another card actually with this set where we did some scene building. I will link to that at the end of the video if you would like to see that as well. Just a little bit of a different scene, definitely a different color scheme, just so you can kind of see another way to use it. You guys know I'm a big fan of using the things that you have in your stash. The stamp set is not new. I've had it for quite some time, but it's cute. And, you know, we're heading into snow season. And so I thought that it would be a good idea to, you know, talk about those scene buildings in doing a snow card. For the coloring of the dogs, I did this little doggy spots, white-ish, you know, kind of white. And then as well as this dog's belly. I wasn't sure if I was going to make him a gray dog or a black dog, the one who's sledding. So I kind of colored it gray to begin with and then decided I was going to go, I was just going to commit and color the dog black. Probably because this dog reminds me of Emma. So Emma, if you don't follow my videos, is one of my dogs. Emma is black and white. She's got a little old white belly and some white spots. But she is definitely our mischievous dog. We were just talking about this because we had Caitlin's birthday party and everybody was over here. Like, she is the sweetest, most loving, biggest pain in the tush. Like, that dog could be being petted all day long, and if someone new walks in the room, she's like, hello, I haven't been loved by you. I need you to love me. Could you pet me, please? And she doesn't like when Molly gets pets, and she doesn't. So she is very sweet, just kind of annoying. Like, she just wants to, she doesn't realize how big she is. You know, she's like a 75-pound dog. And so when you have a little dog that comes over and kind of just plops himself in your lap and, you know, doesn't really pay any attention to the fact that they're I don't want to say not wanted, you know, that it's not an appropriate time to get pets, and they plop down in your lap, you could just kind of scoot them off and, you know, they only weigh 15 pounds or whatever. With my dogs, now Molly doesn't do it usually, but Emma definitely does. And when a 75-pound dog comes and sits, you know, plops her little tush in your lap, you notice. And it's a lot harder to move her out of the way if you're not, you know, if you're in the middle of doing something else and maybe you don't have time to give her all the love and snuggles that she thinks she should be getting at that moment. So this mischievous little sledding dog would for sure be our Emma, like no doubt about it. And then this little pretty one, I did brown, and I used the same browns that I used for the fence. Again, that continuity, not bringing in new browns, just sticking with what I have. And this will help with your scene to kind of come together. So for both of the dogs, I did little pink noses. You certainly could do, you know, black or brown. That's probably more common, but I liked the idea of bringing in the little pink. And so I used an R32 and an R20. For their scarves, I chose them based on my dog's collars. So not anymore because Eric bought her a new one, but before, Emma had a teal collar and Molly had a pink collar. And so that is how I chose their little scarf colors, using, again, the same colors that we've already been using within these two scenes. So, like, you know, they go together. Plus my pictures will look nice because I have to take pictures of them together because the video is about both of them, right? So just adding that little bit of shading. And I did go in, I'm sure you saw on the other one how I added some white polka dots to the little girl's hat. I did also add some white polka dots to his scarf. I am going to die cut. Again, there is no shame in using the die cuts. If it's easier for you, if you don't have the dexterity to create a scene with the fussy cutting, don't sweat it. You can create beautiful scenes with dies. So here I'm going to start building my cards. I am using, this is actually from Picket Fence. It's their extra wide foam tape. And so I'm going to use that. I am putting liquid adhesive on the back of it so that it gives me a little bit more wiggle room. And I am matting both of these on black. I built them the same exact way as landscape cards with a black mat on top of a white card base. And I'm actually gluing it upside down here now, but it doesn't matter because the black mat's the same no matter where we go. And then I will glue the black mat down to my card base. And then we'll start kind of building our scene. This one in the right-hand corner, the one that has the scene stamped down, I did everything the same exact way. For the sentiments for both of these, I white heat embossed on black. I'm using a small strip of this same, because it's the same dimension, you know what I'm saying? So that my pop-up is the same level. But then I didn't realize I put it on the wrong side. So I just peeled it off, moved it to the other side, put down liquid glue, because I knew that it wasn't going, in order for it to sit flush, I needed to have that part popped up. And I'm just going to actually put this right in this bottom center of my card. And I think it's fitting. I have so much fun when we're together. I think it's pretty cute. And then that one's done. For this one, we're going to glue our dies down. I chose to put my little sledding mischievous Emma in the middle, kind of coming off that hill. The fence is really just to help me create that visual triangle. So I'm going to put that down in the bottom right. And then my Molly, she doesn't actually have spots like that. She's a brindle coat. But the one that I was envisioning as Molly is going to go to complete my triangle kind of right in front of that little snow mound that we put in. The sentiment for this one will go across the top left. But here's how you can add just really easy shadows. You can just do little lines underneath your animals, and this is going to ground them. If you're using die cuts, color the edge of the die so that it blends in seamlessly, and then blend that out with your lightest color. So for me, I started with a BV02, blended out with a BV000, and this is going to make them look like they're part of a scene, and this is how we're going to get away with doing the dies. Here I pulled my hex chart out so that I could match my sky. I ended up going with a BG23 and I think a G21. But this is going to vary dependent upon what colors you use and where your characters fall. I did add some shimmer to their outfits on both the cards as well as the snow. I like glitter, but you don't need it. But that is now at whatever, 35 minutes of your time. That concludes both cards. I hope you learned a little something. If you're interested, I hope that you will check out the sale. Like I said, that 10% off. There's no code needed. It's good through the 11th. I appreciate your guys' time. I hope you learned something, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.